You ever catch yourself reacting way too strongly to something small? Like someone sighs and you immediately think you did something wrong. Or your partner goes quiet for a bit and suddenly your mind runs wild. Maybe you're sitting with friends, laughing, talking, but inside you still feel a little on edge. Most people think these reactions mean they're sensitive or overthinking, but really this stuff usually comes from how you grew up, not who you are. Scientists at the Harvard Center on the Developing Child found that a child's brain wires itself around whatever environment they're raised in. So if you grew up around stress, yelling, coldness, or having to be the good kid, your brain learned to stay alert. It learned to check people's moods. It learned to keep the peace. It learned that the safest thing was to shrink a little, or stay quiet, or fix everything around you. And that training sticks with you even when you don't want it to. So now, as an adult, you feel anxious when someone raises their voice, even slightly. You panic when someone pulls away. You feel guilty when you rest. You take things personally because, as a kid, taking things seriously was how you stayed safe. None of this is your fault. It's simply what your childhood taught your body to do. And this is why so much of your suffering feels confusing. You're reacting to today with a nervous system that was shaped years ago. Your lost childhood isn't just a memory. It still shows up in the way you think, feel, and connect with people now. And once you finally understand that, things start to make sense in a way they never did before. But here's the part most people miss. Knowing this isn't the end of the story. It's actually the beginning. Because now the real question becomes, how exactly did your childhood shape those reactions? And why do they still follow you into adulthood? When I first heard the phrase lost childhood, I thought it meant something dramatic, like growing up in extreme chaos or trauma. But the more I learned, the more I realized it's much broader than that. A lost childhood simply means this: you didn't get the emotional experiences a child is supposed to have. Maybe you weren't allowed to be loud, messy, scared, playful, curious, or honest. Maybe you had to grow up too fast. Maybe you spent more time managing adults than being one. That's what it means to lose your childhood, not because it never happened, but because you weren't free to live it. When you grow up in an environment where your needs aren't understood or welcomed, your brain starts adapting, and childhood is when those adaptations stick the deepest. Developmental psychologists explain that a child's brain isn't just learning math or language, it's learning how to feel, how to trust, how to be loved, and how to exist safely around other humans. So if your childhood was filled with stress, silence, unpredictability, pressure to be good, or too much responsibility, your brain shaped itself around those experiences. And here's where the psychology really shows up. A child who doesn't feel emotionally safe gets stuck in survival mode. You stop being a kid and become a small version of an adult, too mature, too careful, too responsible, too quiet, too pleasing. You stop expressing and start observing. You stop asking and start shrinking. In a way, you disappear a little. And even though you grow up, the nervous system that learned how to survive never gets the message that you're safe now. One major study from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child found that kids who grow up under emotional stress develop a hyperactive alert system. Their bodies literally learn to scan for danger, even when nothing is actually wrong. So if you grew up in a home where you had to predict moods, watch every expression, avoid conflict, walk on eggshells, or take care of yourself emotionally, your brain didn't build itself for comfort. It built itself for survival. And that's why adult life feels heavier than it should. You're not reacting to what's happening now. You're reacting with a nervous system trained a long time ago. Think about the roles you had to play as a kid. Maybe you became the mature one because the adults around you weren't dependable. Maybe you learned to be quiet because speaking up always made things worse. Maybe you stayed cheerful to keep everyone calm even when you were hurting inside. Or maybe you became invisible, slipping into the background because your feelings had no safe place to land. These weren't personality traits, they were survival strategies. And the tough part is, they don't disappear the day you turn 18. They grow up with you. And now as an adult, of course you struggle with boundaries. You learned early that your needs didn't matter. Of course trust feels scary. The people who were supposed to feel safe didn't always show up. Of course you panic when someone goes quiet. Silence used to mean danger. Of course you overthink everything. Thinking ahead was how you stayed safe. This is what a lost childhood turns into. Not just missing moments, but missing emotional foundations that every child is supposed to have. And this is exactly why understanding your past matters. Not to blame your parents, not to dig up old pain for no reason, but to finally understand yourself. When you realize that your reactions have a history, they stop feeling like defects. They start making sense. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and you start asking, "Where did I learn this?" And that question, simple as it sounds, is the moment things begin to shift. Because once you understand the psychology behind your patterns, you finally get the power to change them. For most of my life, I honestly thought my reactions were just my personality. I thought I was naturally too sensitive, too anxious, too worried about everything. But as I grew up and started paying attention, I realized something important. A lot of the things I struggle with today didn't come from who I am now. They came from who I had to be when I was a kid. The habits that once helped me survive slowly turned into problems in my adult life. When I was younger, my brain had one job: keep me safe. So I shaped myself around whatever kept the peace. If staying quiet stopped tension, I stayed quiet. If acting strong helped me avoid getting blamed, I acted strong. If pleasing everyone made me feel loved, I became the peacemaker. None of this was a choice, it was survival. The problem is, my brain never realized the danger was over. It kept using those old strategies even when they made my adult life harder. That's why a tiny shift in someone's tone can make my heart race. Why silence from someone I care about feels like rejection. Why small conflicts make me want to fix everything immediately. My brain isn't being dramatic, it's repeating what it learned long ago. A study in the Journal of Neuroscience found that kids who grow up in emotionally unpredictable homes develop a more sensitive amygdala, the fear center of the brain, and that sensitivity follows them into adulthood. Suddenly, my reactions made sense. I avoid conflict because conflict used to feel unsafe. I fear being left because love used to feel inconsistent. I take responsibility for everything because staying in control once protected me. Understanding this changed everything. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" I started asking, "Where did I learn this?" And from that moment, healing finally had somewhere to begin. When you finally start to see how your childhood shaped your reactions, something inside you shifts. You stop thinking of yourself as broken, and you start realizing that you're simply repeating patterns you learned long ago. But recognizing the pattern is only the first step. The real work, the healing begins when you learn how to unlearn the things that no longer help you. And yes, you can absolutely do that. The first thing you need to understand is this: your brain isn't stuck. Even if you've reacted the same way for 20 or 30 years, you're not trapped in those habits forever. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change and rewire itself. And researchers at the National Institute of Mental Health have shown that adults can form new emotional and behavioral patterns at any age. That means your childhood shaped you, but it does not have to define you. You can literally teach your brain a new way to respond. So how do you start? you begin by noticing. That sounds too simple, but it's actually the most powerful step. Every time you feel that panic, that overthinking, that urge to please, or that fear of conflict, pause and ask yourself, is this the situation, or is this my childhood talking? When you start separating the past you from the current you create a tiny bit of space in your mind. And it's in that space that change can happen. Next, you need to practice giving yourself what you didn't get when you were younger. If you grew up without emotional safety, then as an adult, you give yourself safety by not judging your feelings. If you grew up being told to stay quiet, you start practicing saying what you really feel, even in small ways. If you grew up never being comforted, then now you comfort yourself instead of criticizing yourself when you struggle. This is what psychologists call reparenting, becoming the adult you needed when you were a child. Another important part of unlearning is setting boundaries. If you grew up in a home where your feelings didn't matter, then of course you struggle to say no. But every time you set even a tiny boundary, saying you're tired, saying you can't help today, asking for space, you're teaching your nervous system something new. I'm not that powerless kid anymore. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about showing your brain that you're safe now. You also have to get comfortable with uncomfortable emotions. Many of your childhood patterns formed because certain feelings weren't allowed. Anger, sadness, fear, disappointment. When your brain thinks a feeling is dangerous, it tries to shut it down or avoid it. That's why you might freeze, get defensive, or numb out. But when you let yourself feel something, really feel it, you're showing your brain that you're not in danger anymore. It takes practice, but each time you face a feeling, your brain rewires just a little more. And finally, you have to remember that healing isn't fast. It isn't perfect. Some days you'll feel like you're doing great, and other days you'll fall back into old habits. That's normal. That's human. Unlearning takes time because you're undoing patterns that took years to build. What matters is that you keep going. Every moment of awareness, every boundary, every honest emotion, every gentle thought toward yourself, that's progress. Healing doesn't mean you erase your childhood. It means you stop letting it run your life from the shadows. You start showing your brain that the danger is over. You teach yourself new ways to respond, new ways to feel, new ways to exist in the world. And slowly, without even noticing it at first, you start becoming someone new, someone who isn't reacting from fear, but living from clarity. There's a moment in your healing journey when you start to wonder if something is wrong with you. You're trying to understand yourself, trying to break old patterns, trying to be better, but somehow healing feels heavier than you expected. And here's the truth you rarely hear. Healing feels hard not because you're broken, but because you're finally touching the parts of yourself you learned to hide for survival. When you were young, you didn't get to choose how to cope. Your brain simply did whatever it had to do to protect you: shut down, tune out, stay quiet, act strong, be perfect, or disappear into the background. Those patterns kept you afloat back then, but now they show up in moments when you wish they wouldn't. When someone ignores your message and your chest tightens. When a small mistake ruins your whole day. When closeness feels scary. When rest feels irresponsible. When love feels unsafe because it's unfamiliar. One of the big reasons healing feels confusing is because your body doesn't know you're safe yet. According to a study published in the Journal of Neuroscience, children who grow up in unpredictable emotional environments develop a hypersensitive amygdala, the part of the brain that detects threat. This means as an adult, your nervous system reacts to everyday stress the same way it reacted to real danger when you were small. To when someone raises their voice, when plans change suddenly, when you're criticized, or when you sense someone pulling away, your body isn't reacting to the present, it's reacting to the past. You're not too emotional, you're not weak, Your body is doing exactly what it was trained to do. But here's where things start to shift. Healing isn't about forcing yourself to get over it. It's about teaching your body a new truth, one gentle moment at a time. Healing feels hard because it's unfamiliar. If you grew up stuffing down emotions, then expressing them now feels awkward. If you learn to stay small, speaking up feels terrifying. If you learned to always be in control, rest feels dangerous. Healing feels uncomfortable because you're stepping outside the only version of safety your brain ever knew. That discomfort isn't failure, it's growth. It's your nervous system slowly learning, maybe things are different now. And here's something you need to hear. You don't heal by pushing yourself harder. You heal by responding to yourself differently. Instead of saying, "Why am I like this?" you start asking, "What is this part of me afraid of?" Instead of forcing yourself to be strong, you allow yourself to be honest. Instead of hiding your emotions, you give them a moment to exist. Healing is less about fixing and more about reconnecting with your body, your feelings, your needs, and the child inside you who never stopped hoping things could feel softer. The real work is slow and gentle. You might notice small things first. You pause before reacting. You breathe before assuming the worst. You rest without guilt for 5 minutes. You say no once. You choose someone who treats you with kindness. You speak to yourself with the compassion you never received. And one day, without realizing exactly when it happened, you react differently. The thing that used to break you now only stings. The silence that used to feel like abandonment now feels neutral. The mistakes you used to punish yourself for become simply part of being human. Healing is not the absence of pain, it's the presence of understanding. And the fact that you're even trying means you're already further along than you think. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're unlearning a lifetime of survival patterns you never chose in the first place. And every time you choose gentleness, every time you pause, every time you listen to yourself, you're proving something powerful. You're not the person you had to be. You're becoming the person you were always meant to be. There was a time when I kept wondering why I felt disconnected from my own life, even on the days when everything around me looked okay. I didn't feel broken, but I didn't feel whole either. And I honestly thought it was just me that I was somehow missing a piece everyone else naturally had. But the more I learned, the more I talked to people with similar childhoods, people who grew up walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect or swallowing their feelings, the clearer it became. This wasn't a personal flaw. This was something many of us carried, without even realizing it. Growing up in environments where we had to be easy, quiet, or strong, we learned to disconnect from ourselves just to get through the day. That's why coming home to ourselves as adults doesn't feel natural. It feels awkward, heavy, sometimes even wrong. Nobody taught us how to trust our feelings or express our needs. So when we finally try to do it now, it's like learning a skill we should have learned as kids. A skill that feels strangely foreign, even though it belongs to us. There's real science behind this too. Research from Dr. Vincent Felitti, co-founder of the A Studies, shows that children who grow up under emotional stress often develop an overactive nervous system that stays on alert mode, even in adulthood. In simple terms, our bodies learned to scan for danger long before we learned how to tie our shoes. That's why small arguments can overwhelm us, silence can make us panic, or disappointment can feel like a punch. It's not that we're sensitive for no reason. Our bodies are reacting to patterns they learned years ago. This is why healing feels so strange sometimes. When you're used to surviving, peace feels uncomfortable. When you've spent your whole life making yourself small, speaking up feels like breaking a rule. When you've spent years keeping distance to stay safe, Letting people in feels dangerous. Healing isn't smooth or pretty. It's messy. It pulls up grief we didn't know we were still carrying. It makes us look at our past with clearer eyes and realize how much that younger version of us really needed. And honestly, that grief hits hard. You start remembering birthdays you didn't enjoy, moments you wanted comfort but stayed quiet, times you pretended you were okay because nobody knew how to help you. But that grief isn't a step backwards. It's actually a sign that you're finally allowing yourself to feel what you once had to ignore. Pain doesn't show up because you're broken, it shows up because you're healing. What surprised me most was realizing that healing doesn't require huge, dramatic changes. It's built on small things, like telling yourself it's okay to rest, or letting someone care about you without pushing them away. It's pausing before you overreact. It's choosing to tell the truth about what you feel, even if your voice is shaky. It's letting go of guilt for things that were never your responsibility. Every small moment of kindness toward yourself is like turning on a light for that younger version of you who learned to survive in the dark. Maybe that's what coming home really means. Not becoming someone new, not fixing everything at once, but becoming someone honest. Someone who can hold their wounds without being defined by them. Someone who can finally say, I deserve to feel safe, and actually believe it. And when you reach that place, even for a moment, something soft happens inside you. You look back at your younger self, the kid who tried their best with what they had, and you whisper, you did enough. I've got us now. And for the first time, that feels true. No matter where you are in your healing journey, just remember this: you're not behind and you're not broken. You're simply learning to come home to yourself after years of surviving. If this video helped you feel a little more understood, a little less alone, I'd love for you to stay with this community. Hit subscribe, share this with someone who might need it today, and let's keep healing together, one small step at a time.